whence the widespread notion that general justice and security be relegated to an impersonal branch of a fiefdom separate from general beings, whereas such causes had once been the forte of beings as such, and that this be so necessary. This idea is but a historical aberration that appeared centuries into known humankind, an outgrowth of subjugating forces that grew in tandem with the then nascent economic system for the sake of hegemony of the opulent, whether in the detainment or active enchainment of those outside their fiefdom. And it is a fiefdom, though it may don a different mask, indeed one of liberty. Although this agency so established was theoretically meant to reduce societal deviance, such deviance itself, as thereby defined, had already reduced from times of known uprisings decades prior, and yet more qualifiers for deviance had been added post hoc, with the pretense of needed protection to justify this addition to the fiefdom as underlings, even though the agency actually gained footing in less populous areas. This notion was, and remains, self-sustaining, as the blight just's closest servants are given quotas by which to justify themselves and supply supposed proof of a danger they must fight, even if that danger merely be to an imagined societal face, or merely a prelude to more serious danger, if not put out at once. If conditions friendly to the fulfillment of these quotas cannot be found, they are made. And so it was with the establishment of this agency in the first place, with the pretense of quelling danger, that has gained an increasingly effective hypnosis over countless beings over the course of centuries. But during and before such establishment there have existed sets of beings communally dedicated to the arbitration of justice based on common need and root principle, not state decrees, which can neither catch up nor ethically tarry with the tides and subjectivities of civic behavior, for in many cases there were no such tentacles of power in the first place. The blight just in olden times saw that a profiteering set of beings would be more willing to toil for the naive, if not deranged, prospect of an opulence so convincingly presented as blissful, and would thereby accept whatever means was offered them to protect their ventures from any interference, real or imagined, as in the case of mere existence, by desperate other societal underlings that the decreers convinced the profiteers were underneath and downwardly mobile due to their disruptive ways, if not supposedly innate character. This increasing territorial topology of resources did, fittingly enough, develop from the spoils of pilfering and enchainment abroad, for this increased both profit and conflict among profiteers. Soon an order emerged around maximizing the fiefdom as opulence by the above means, and given the many antagonisms and core human betrayals involved in this, yet another agency of servants to the blight just had to be erected in order to quell the inevitable unrest under this order. But forget not also that the existence of such an agency means that acting upon dire situations, as they arise in itself raises risk of persecution from that same agency, who are inevitably prone to delays in engagement, biases, lack of witness, bureaucracy, etc. A return to systems in which beings are communally united and actively conscious of the needs of the whole, uninhibited in will, thought, circumstance, or law by the looming specter of a cudgeling class, is essential. The blight just in olden times saw that a profiteer the ebb and flow of context and need cannot be properly met by geographically blanket rule, especially where mercenary interest has put the cart of imposition before the horse of justice, mode it be, as indeed has happened. Regulations are only according to the dictates of the decreers and their henchmen of the time, and will ultimately be made in whatever way they want given their combined powers of force, resources, and reach. Many may counter that, if this were true, yet more would be prohibited under their rule than is already so, but this underestimates what more is or will be, whether codified as law or not, practically prohibited or close to it. The temporary incentive of decreers to, for the time being, allow certain behaviors and states of being in order to better leverage their extant rules, not unlike the kidnapper who expects thanks for pulling out the knife they planted or giving crutches for the limbs they broke, and who by attrition may win the merciful affection of their victim. The slow and circumstantial process of allowed restriction that these decreers follow so as not to startle their subjects to the loss of their right by maximizing depraved power immediately, and finally, that which has already been prohibited for us to date. Prohibitions so ambient that they have been internalized as timeless realities, necessities, or even necessary evils, even in the very name of freedom itself. Indeed, it is in the name of freedom that these restrictions, or the systemic configuration that contains them unbeknownst to many of its inhabitants, are so feverishly defended, often merely by comparison to a distorted outside bogey system. It is highly difficult to properly suss out the limits of the circumstances in which one has long been inculcated, particularly the limits of thought. We are, as fish in water never yet knowing the shore, existing within the accumulated and coagulated matter of social thought forms as old as millennia, the difference being that upon ejecting from this figurative water we yet stand to survive and grow beyond the initial gasping shock that spells the end of the fish. In fact, we may not have a choice, for what we are now submerged in, as we might see, is quite poisonous.